Have you ever wondered if your prayers for departed loved ones truly reach them? It seems like a simple question, but what if I told you that, according to Dolores Cannon, most people are making such a profound mistake that instead of helping, they might be trapping the very spirit they are trying to free? Yes, this is the kind of revelation that shakes you because it directly touches on what is most sacred, how we connect with those who are no longer physically here. Many people's first reaction upon hearing this is defensive. After all, praying for the dead is an act of love, isn't it? That's what we were taught from a young age. It's a gesture of care, a way to keep memories alive and send peace to those who have passed on. So how could there be anything wrong with it? That's exactly where the issue begins. Because according to Cannon, love isn't the problem. The problem lies in the hidden and often unconscious intention we carry when making these prayers. Dolores Cannon spent over 40 years working with regressions and deep hypnosis. Her work investigated what happens to consciousness after the physical body dies. She claimed to converse directly with spirits, consciousnesses, and even what she called the higher consciousness. And amidst thousands of sessions, a pattern began to emerge. People who had died but didn't move on remained trapped in a state of confusion. And do you know what many of them reported as one of the reasons for this? The insistent prayers of the living, laden with attachment and sadness. Think about it. When you pray for someone you love, but you do so while holding their image, calling their name, asking them to be well, you might unknowingly be sending a call for them to remain connected to you. It's as if your energy is saying, "Stay here, don't go yet." For those on the other side, this connection can create an anchor, a weight. And what if, instead of being a help, this was delaying their process? I know this sounds counterintuitive. It's almost impossible for a human heart to think about letting go of someone it loves. It's natural to want to protect, to want to be close, even if it's through prayers. But this is where Dolores Cannon's correction becomes essential. It's not about stopping prayer. It's about changing the way we pray. And this change can mean the difference between liberation and imprisonment. Dolores said that at the moment of death, the soul is drawn to a light, to a state of expanded consciousness where there is understanding and rest. But the energy of the living, especially that of those with intense emotional ties, can act as a magnet in the opposite direction. Imagine someone about to board a train that will take them to a place of peace, but just as they step onto the car, they feel a hand pulling them back to the station. That hand is often our longing. And here's a curious detail. She discovered that it's not just sadness that traps at excessive worry. Feeling that the person needs help to be saved can also create this bond. In other words, when we pray as if the deceased is in danger, we send the wrong message. It's as if we're saying, "Well, you're not safe, so I need to intervene." This, according to Cannon, doesn't help the spirit. It only reinforces the feeling that they're not ready to move on. Now, I want you to think about something. If this mistake is so common, how many spirits are at this very moment trapped on that frontier between our world and the next, not by their choice, but because of the way we pray? This question is unsettling, and it's meant to be. Because if we truly love, perhaps the greatest act of love is precisely the opposite of what we are accustomed to doing. But don't blame yourself. This attached way of praying has been taught for centuries. No one told us there was another way. No one explained that. After someone leaves, the best prayer is one that releases, not one that holds on. Popular religion has given us rituals that mix faith and attachment, and we repeat these rites without question. Until someone like Dolores Cannon appears and says, "Wait, there is another way." And what is that path? That's where the promise I want to make to you now comes in. Throughout this conversation, we will understand how this correction works in practice. We will see how to transform our prayers into an impulse of liberation instead of a chain that binds. And when we reach the end, you will not only know what this biggest mistake is, but you will also carry with you a new way of connecting with those you love, one that honors memory and respects the spirit's journey. Before we get to that part, I want you to allow yourself to feel a little of this idea. Imagine that beloved person, their face, their way of speaking, the moments you shared together. Now, instead of thinking of them as someone who left and needs help, Think of them as someone who is traveling to a beautiful place and who only needs one last gesture from you, a wave goodbye that says, "Go in peace, I am well." Do you perceive the difference in energy? One holds, the other liberates. And why is this so difficult for many elderly people? Because with age, the subject of death draws closer to daily life. We see friends, relatives, loved ones departing. And praying becomes a habit, almost an emotional necessity. It's a way to feel that we are still connected. And of course, the idea that our prayers could harm instead of help sounds like an injustice. But it is precisely for this reason that this conversation is important, so that we can pray consciously and truly beneficially. Dolores Cannon also pointed out a second aspect of this error. Often, when praying for the dead, people talk more about themselves than about the spirit. They say things like, "I don't know how to live without you, I'm suffering so much," and unknowingly they place their pain at the center of the prayer. This is not reprehensible, it's human. But for those on the other side, these words sound like a call to return, to try and console those left behind. And this, she claimed, is one of the biggest causes of lost spirits that appeared in her sessions. Therefore, the first step in Dolores Cannon's correction is this: understanding that prayer is not to satisfy our emotional need, but to support the path of the departed. And for this, we need to learn to pray without attachment, without calling the spirit back, without projecting our sadness onto it. Prayer should be like a breeze that pushes the boat into the open sea, not like a rope that pulls it back to the dock. And here, you might be thinking, but then, how does one pray like that? How to send love without holding on? That's the question that will guide us, and it's precisely the answer I will reveal to you throughout this conversation. Because when we understand the principle, we realize it's not about praying less, but about praying better. Now I'll leave you with a thought that came to me while preparing this video. What if on the day you depart, the people you love pray for you exactly the same way you pray for others today? Would you feel free to move on, or would you feel a weight pulling you back? That's where the key to understanding what Dolores Cannon meant lies. When Dolores Cannon spoke about praying without attachment, she wasn't suggesting that we stop loving or remembering those who have departed. On the contrary, for her, love was the essential fuel that propels the soul towards the light. But there was a clear distinction between love and attachment. Love, she said, is expansive. It desires the best for the other, even if that means being apart. Attachment, on the other hand, is restrictive. It desires to keep the other close, even if that goes against the natural path. This difference for many is subtle, but for those on the border between this world and the next, it is decisive. Cannon observed that many of the prayers she analyzed had more to do with the needs of the one praying than with the freedom of the one who had departed. It's as if deep down the person was saying, "I want you to go into the light, but I also want you to stay here with me in some way." This ambiguous message transmitted through emotion is perceived by the spirit as a call to stay. And this is exactly what can create a kind of spiritual fog, making it difficult for them to find the path of transition. She gave a very striking example. Imagine you are at an airport, ready to board a flight that will take you to a place you've always dreamed of visiting. But in the boarding lounge, a loved one begins to cry, hold your hand, say they can't live without you. You hesitate. The plane is there, the door is open, but your heart is tied to that scene. This is how many spirits described the experience of departing while receiving prayers laden with attachment. And here there's something important that few realize. It's not just intense grief that holds spirits back, but also the habit of mentally talking to the deceased as if they were still physically present and responsible for our well-being. Phrases like, "Protect me," "Don't abandon me," or "I need you to be with me," reinforce the bond of emotional dependence. According to Cannon, this creates an energetic tie that can keep the spirit trapped near the physical plane, feeling responsible or obliged to remain. Therefore, the first part of the correction she proposed was to change the focus of the prayer. Instead of talking about what we feel or need, the prayer should be entirely directed toward the spirit's journey. This means sending thoughts like, "May you be enveloped by light. May you find peace and rest. May you move forward freely and confidently to the next step." The difference is clear. One prayer speaks of our pain, the other speaks of their path. And here's a curious point Cannon emphasized. There's no need to stop feeling longing, nor is it realistic to pretend there's no pain. But it's possible to feel all of that and still not use prayer to try to fill that void. The moment of prayer should be an act of surrender, not insistence. It's like releasing a balloon into the sky. You know it will go away, but you believe its destination is good. She also said that many elderly people find it harder to make this mental shift because throughout their lives, they were taught to associate prayer with supplication. Asking was at the core of everything. Asking for protection, asking for intercession, asking for help. So when someone dies, the natural reflex is to continue asking, but now for the deceased to be well or keep looking out for us. However, according to Cannon, in the case of the dead, asking is not as effective as releasing. And here, you might be wondering, but what about masses, novenas, and traditional rituals? Don't they help? Cannon replied that they do help, yes, when done with the correct intention. If community prayer is a sending of light, without attachment, it is powerful. But if the ritual reinforces the idea that the deceased is in debt or in danger, that can reinforce a negative bond. The danger is not in the ritual itself, but in the feeling that accompanies it. To illustrate, she recounted a case of a woman who had lost her husband and for years prayed for him to remain by her side. When this woman was hypnotized, Cannon perceived that the husband's consciousness was still strongly connected to the house and his wife. He said he couldn't move on because he felt she needed him. Only when she was advised to change her prayer to something like, "Go in peace, I am safe," was he able to detach and cross over to the next level. And this leads us to a second part of the correction, understanding that releasing does not mean forgetting. Many people are afraid to let go because they think it will erase memories or reduce the emotional bond. But according to Cannon, the truth is the opposite. When the spirit is freed, it is more capable of connecting with us purely, without interference from dense emotions. It is in this freedom that encounters in dreams, sensations of gentle presence, and comforting coincidences can occur. Think about it. Perhaps that feeling that a loved one doesn't appear or doesn't give signs isn't because they are too distant, but because they are still too trapped. Freeing them might be precisely what opens space for a new form of connection. Another essential point Cannon explained is that time is not the same on the other side. For the spirit, the passage is immediate, but for us, bound to linear time, the feeling of separation is prolonged. This means that for them, the act of moving into the light does not eternally distance them from us. It is merely the beginning of a new form of presence. When we understand this, praying with detachment becomes easier, because we know we are not saying goodbye forever, but rather, see you later, in a different way. Dolores also warned against a common mistake, praying as if we were trying to summon the spirit to hear or respond to us. This intention of direct communication, laden with expectation, can act as a chain. Her recommendation was simple: send love and blessings without expecting a return. The response, when it comes, will be natural and spontaneous, and not the result of an attempt to pull the spirit back. If you stop to think, this change in perspective is not just spiritual, but deeply emotional. It requires us to acknowledge and accept our pain without using it as a tool to hold on to those we love. It's an exercise in emotional maturity, something that for many elderly people can be challenging because their entire lives were built on very strong family and community ties. And perhaps here lies the most transformative point of Dolores Cannon's correction. Praying is not an act of possession, it is an act of trust. When we trust that the person we love is going to a place of light, we don't feel the need to hold them back. And when we let go, love ceases to be a rope and becomes a wind that propels them forward. But of course, doing this in practice is not simple. Now let's talk about how step by step to transform the way we pray, with concrete examples, phrases that liberate, and even small rituals that Cannon recommended to create this energy of release. Because it's not enough to understand the mistake. We need to learn how to correct it in everyday life. Now that you understand the problem and the logic behind it, it's time to put into practice what Dolores Cannon called liberating prayer. She insisted that to truly help a spirit move on, good intentions weren't enough. It was necessary to align thought, emotion, and words. If even one of these elements was out of sync, the prayer could once again become an anchor. The first step, according to Cannon, is emotional preparation. Before you begin to pray, pause and observe how you are feeling. If your chest feels tight, if sadness dominates, if longing comes as a knot in your throat, breathe deeply. She recommended taking 3 slow, conscious breaths, imagining that with each exhalation, you are releasing a little of that weight. This doesn't mean suppressing the pain, but creating an internal space where the intention to liberate can emerge. Only after this, she said, should we begin the prayer. And here is one of the phrases Cannon most liked to teach. I love you and I release you. Go in peace. May the light receive and guide you. Notice the 3 parts of this phrase. First, there is the affirmation of love, which is essential and should come unconditionally. Then comes explicit liberation, a conscious act of letting go. Lastly, the positive direction, sending the spirit towards the light. It is simple, yet powerful, because it covers the 3 correct intentions: to love, to liberate, and to bless. Another example she used was, may you follow your path with confidence. I will be fine. We will meet again in due time. Here there's an additional very important element, the assurance that you who remain are safe. According to Cannon, many spirits linger because they feel that those left behind will not be able to cope with their absence. By declaring that you will be fine, you cut off this worry, allowing them to move on without guilt or fear. And it's not just about words. The emotion with which you say or think these phrases is crucial. If deep down you are still begging them to stay, that will be the true message that reaches the spirit. Therefore, she advised performing the liberating prayer only in moments of relative calm, even if sadness is present. To strengthen this state, Cannon suggested small symbolic rituals. One of them was lighting a white candle, not as a call for the spirit to come to you, but as a symbol of the light you wish to send. When lighting it, you can say, "This light is my gift for your journey. May it illuminate your passage." This helps the mind focus on the act of sending and not retaining. Another ritual she taught involved nature. You could take a leaf or a small flower, hold it in your hands while thinking of the loved one, and then release it into a river, a lake, or to the wind. As you do this, imagine that you are surrendering the spirit to the current of life, trusting that it will be carried to where it needs to go. This physical gesture helps the body and mind feel the release concretely. Dolores also spoke about the use of visualizations. She asked us to imagine the loved one enveloped in golden light, smiling, walking towards a serene horizon. This image replaces the natural tendency to see them at the moment of death or suffering. When we repeat this visualization along with the prayer, we are reprogramming our energy to transmit peace, not burden. And here's an interesting observation. Cannon said that often the energy that traps a spirit doesn't just come from explicit grief, but from guilt. People who feel they should have done more or didn't say goodbye properly tend to pray, trying to compensate for the past. This guilt, even silent, acts like a rope. So part of the liberating prayer also involves forgiving oneself. You can include in your prayer something like, "I forgive myself for what was not said or done. Our love is greater than any failing. Go free." By doing this, you are dissolving one of the most resistant ties, that there are still pending matters that need to be resolved between you before they can depart. Now you might be thinking, what if I've been praying with attachment for years? Have I caused irreversible damage? Cannon was categorical on this point. No, nothing is irreversible. The spirit, even if it has remained close for a while, can move on at any moment. And a sincere liberating prayer offered now can be the impulse that was missing. She also recounted that in many cases, the spirit had already moved on, but the living person remained attached to them energetically out of habit. In this scenario, the liberating prayer serves more to heal the one who remains. It's like closing a door that was left ajar, allowing you to live the present with more lightness. For the elderly, Cannon suggested transforming this practice into a weekly habit, almost like a small ritual of liberation. Choose a day, a time, and repeat the prayer, not to ensure it works, but to keep alive the intention of love without attachment. She said that the more natural this becomes, the less space there is for pain to turn into emotional dependence. And here comes a point of retention that she liked to emphasize. You do not lose the connection when you liberate. On the contrary, free spirits connect more clearly, more lovingly, and more subtly, and it is precisely when you expect nothing in return that small coincidences begin to emerge, a song on the radio, a scent in the air, a memory that warms the heart. To conclude this part, Cannon left a reminder. Death is not an end, it's a change of address. If the person you love has truly moved house, why keep them trapped at the door? The greatest gift you can give is to make space for them to explore their new home. And, at the right time, you will meet again, but without anyone having to wait outside. Now, let's delve into what Dolores Cannon said about the collective impact of these liberating prayers, how they not only help a specific spirit, but also influence an entire energy field around us. We will see how a single elderly person who changes the way they pray can unknowingly be the key to breaking chains that bind several spirits in an entire community. Dolores Cannon said that the way we pray for the dead doesn't just affect the individual we direct the prayer towards, it reverberates. According to her, every thought and feeling we emit enters a collective field, a kind of consciousness network that connects all beings. This means that when an elderly person changes their way of praying, they are not just liberating that specific loved one, they are also clearing and reorganizing an energy that can benefit many other spirits who remain trapped by attached prayers. She recounted stories from regressions where entire groups of consciousnesses appeared wandering in the same space as if they were in an endless waiting room. And upon investigating, she realized that all of them were constant targets of prayers, laden with longing, fear, or guilt, not just from one person, but from entire families and even communities. It was as if there was a barrier created by the sum of all these emotional calls, making passage difficult. Now imagine if a single family changes the pattern, this barrier begins to dissolve in some places. If more people change, the passage opens more and more. Cannon believed that this was one of the greatest spiritual contributions anyone could make, transforming their way of praying so that the collective energy becomes lighter, allowing the transition to be more natural. She compared this situation to a river blocked by branches and rocks. Each attached prayer is like another branch thrown into the current. When we begin to offer liberating prayers, it's as if we are removing these obstacles one by one. In the beginning, the water still flows slowly, but as the blockage decreases, the river flows again with strength and clarity. And there was an additional effect that Cannon observed in her sessions. When the energy of the waiting room dissolved, it wasn't just the spirits who benefited. The living people connected to them also felt relief. Emotional symptoms like chronic sadness, feelings of emptiness, or even recurring nightmares disappeared without any other apparent explanation. For her, this happened because the energetic bond of attachment was severed on both sides. That's why Cannon insisted that the elderly, especially those who are spiritual references for their families, have a crucial role. When a grandparent changes their way of praying and explains to their children and grandchildren why they changed, the impact multiplies. The practice spreads, and gradually, entire communities stop reinforcing this energetic barrier. She recounted a striking case, an elderly woman who, after understanding this teaching, gathered her family for a different collective prayer. Instead of asking the deceased to rest in peace in a supplicating tone, they all joined to visualize him smiling, walking towards the light while saying together, "We love you and we release you. Go in peace." The result, according to the woman, was an immediate feeling of lightness, as if the atmosphere of the house had changed. Cannon said that when this change becomes a habit, there is also a profound internal transformation. The person who previously carried pain as a permanent burden begins to feel longing in a healthier way, as a memory that warms instead of hurts. And, for the elderly, this means spending their last years of life with more serenity, without carrying heavy burdens that cannot be resolved. She also talked about the importance of teaching this practice to people who are still afraid of death. Often fear comes from the idea that upon departing we will be forgotten or left behind. When we show that liberating is not forgetting but rather an act of love, we are helping not only the dead but also the living to lose this fear. Another point Cannon brought up, which surprised many, is that this practice does not depend on a specific religion, whether Catholic, Spiritist, Evangelical, Jewish, Buddhist. Everyone can adapt the liberating prayer to their faith. What matters is the intention to let go and trust in the other's spiritual destiny. She even said that, if it is more comfortable for the person, they can maintain the rituals they already know, just changing the words and the emotion that accompany them. And she was clear. Changing the way you pray is not betraying tradition. It is perfecting it. It's like adjusting a boat's rudder so that it reaches its safe harbor faster. The core of faith, love and care, remains, but now acts more effectively. On a broader scale, Cannon believed that if there were a global shift in how the dead are prayed for, there would be a true mass liberation of trapped consciousnesses. This, for her, would be one of humanity's greatest spiritual advancements, as it would open space for a cleaner flow between the physical and spiritual worlds. And this flow would benefit everyone, as it would bring more clarity, more intuition, and more peace to those who are alive. She also alerted us to something subtle. Often, the very person who prays with attachment fears being forgotten when they die. It's as if unconsciously they hold on to others to ensure they will also be held on to in the future. By practicing liberating prayer, the person learns that being remembered doesn't depend on holding anyone back, and this understanding brings a type of freedom that begins even before death. And perhaps this is the deepest legacy of this correction. It's not just about helping those who have departed, it's also about preparing ourselves for our own departure. By letting go today, we are training our hearts to accept being let go tomorrow. This reduces fear, increases confidence, and transforms our relationship with the time we have left. In the end, Cannon said that the ultimate test is simple. When thinking of a departed loved one, ask yourself, is the image I have of them now one of someone free and happy, or someone trapped by my presence? If it's the latter, it's time to change the prayer, not out of obligation, but out of love. And here we return to the beginning of this conversation. The biggest mistake the elderly make when praying for the dead is not praying. It is praying without realizing they are holding on. Dolores Cannon's correction does not require abandoning faith, breaking traditions, or ceasing to feel longing. It asks for only one thing: to exchange weight for lightness, supplication for trust, and attachment for liberation. Perhaps if everyone who heard this message today makes this change, we can imagine a world where no one is trapped between this life and the next because of a misguided prayer. A world where death is, in fact, merely a gentle passage. Because on the other side, and here too, there is only love that liberates. If this video brought you clarity and touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. You might be about to liberate more than one soul, and perhaps your own as well.